Good morning, everybody. Hope you're having a great morning. It's Friday, getting ready for Shabbos, and I wanted to tell you a Torah thought. So this Shabbos, many weeks of the Jewish calendar, many Shabbos have a name for the Shabbos. Besides the Torah portion we read that week, there's a name that it's called by, and for different reasons. Well, this Shabbos has a name too. If you go over to any Jew who's familiar, who's engaged in his Judaism, and you ask him, what's the Shabbos called? He'll say, this Shabbos, it's called Shabbat Chazon. What's Shabbat Chazon? Shabbat Chazon means the Shabbos of vision. And you'll ask him, 1 second, why is it called a Shabbos of vision? What does it mean, a Shabbos of vision? What is it, 20/20, your eyesight? He'll say, no. We all know that every Shabbos in Shul, besides reading a Torah portion, we read Haftorah. And this week's Haftorah is one of the saddest and darkest Haftorahs of the entire year, if not the saddest. It's the vision of Isaiah. The prophet Yeshayahu speaks the vision of destruction of the temple. Yada Shor Kaneu, he starts off. Even an animal, a bull, an ox, knows who its master is, but the Jews don't know God. Isaiah goes on to say, how did Jerusalem become a harlot? It's destroyed. And he gives a full vision of what the destruction of the temple will be. That's why we read it the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, because next week is Tisha B'Av when the temple was destroyed. So that's why it's called Shabbat Chazon. But how about you go over to a Hasidic Jew and you say, hey, why is it called Shabbat Chazon? You know what he'll tell you? He'll say, well, he'll give you an explanation of the great Hasidic master, one of the most beloved early Hasidic masters, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev was called the defender of the Jewish people. He always saw the positive, as I told you many stories before. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev says that the reason why this Shabbos is called Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbos of vision, is because on this Shabbos, every single Jew gets like a mini prophecy. God gives each Jew a vision of how the third temple will look rebuilt. Every Jew gets a vision. Imagine. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev says the reason why it's called Shabbat Chazon is because of this vision. Well, I have a question for you. It's like everything in Judaism. There has to be an argument. What's Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev saying? The opposite of what we know. The simple meaning is that it's called the Shabbos of vision because the Haftorah we read starts off Chazon Yeshayahu, the vision of Isaiah, which is a vision of destruction, of the destruction of the first temple. So how does Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev come and turn it on its head and say that instead of imagining that it's a vision of destruction, no, it's really a vision of God showing every single Jew a prophecy, a vision of the third temple? Come on. I mean, how could you put something on its head like that? To understand this, I want to tell you a fascinating story the Talmud tells us that doesn't really make sense. It was the day of Tisha B'Av, of the destruction of the temple. And there was a Jew who was in the field with his cow. With his ox. He was planting. He was doing work in the field. And suddenly, his cow stopped and gave a massive moo. There was an Arab that was right next to him, and the Arab told the Jew, listen, he says, unyoke your cow, free it of its stake, because your temple has now been destroyed. That's it. A minute later, the cow gives another moo, even louder. And the guy, the Arab, who knew how to read the language of animals, this is what the Talmud tells us, he looks at the Jew and he says, yoke your cow again, right? Reset the stake, because the Redeemer, Mashiach, has been born. So 1 minute he tells us to unyoke it because the temple was destroyed. The next minute he tells us to put the yoke on because the Redeemer was born. What's going on here? The Redeemer was born while the temple was being destroyed. And if the Redeemer was born while the temple was being destroyed, where's he been for 2,000 years? Why haven't we seen him? What's the definition of this? So to understand this, we need to understand the law in Judaism. I know I'm taking you from one to the other. It's like Talmudic study, right? You go from one idea to the next, to the third, and then you'll come all the way back a full circle. The Torah tells us that the law is Magid Varav Yaakov Chukav Mishpatav L'Yisrael. That God, He tells His things to the Jewish people and His laws to the people of Israel. What does that mean? The rabbis say that every law that God gave the Jewish people, if He gave us a law, a rule, what we have, what we can and can't do, the same thing is with God. He does the same for Himself. So, some of you might know, there's a law in Judaism that you're never allowed to destroy a shul. A temple, a shul is never allowed to be destroyed. You're not allowed to even break some of its bricks. It's the worst thing to destroy a temple. In fact, if anyone remembers that sad time in 2005 where they pulled the Jewish people out of the Gaza, out of Gush Katif, the beautiful places that the Jews had, they're thinking it would bring peace. Instead it brought rockets, but I don't want to go in there. But when they pulled out the Jews and they took everything away, the one thing that the Israeli government, even in that harshness where they were evicting Jews from their homes, the land that God gave us, they did not destroy the shuls. And who could forget the visions of as the Arabs came in, as the Palestinians came into the land that we gave them, instead of converting it to something else, they literally burned it down. But why didn't Israel destroy it? Because it's forbidden in Judaism to destroy a shul. You're not allowed to. There's only one condition. There's a stipulation in Judaism. If you're destroying the shul to build another bigger one on its place, then you're allowed to, because then it's not called destroying, right? Because in every sense of building, you have two phases of the building. First, you destroy what's there, and then you rebuild it even nicer, even bigger, even better. So if you're planning to rebuild it right there, even nicer and bigger, then you're allowed to. Say the rabbis, how could God have destroyed the temple? Doesn't He tell us we're not allowed to destroy a temple? So you might say to me, one second, God didn't destroy the temple, Nebuchadnezzar did. But if you look at the prophecy of Isaiah, God says, Hineni shaleach elcha, I will send from north Nebuchadnezzar to destroy it. So true, they had vicious intentions, but God allowed it. How did God allow it? So the only answer the rabbis explain is, because God destroyed it, because He was planning to rebuild an even nicer and bigger one on that spot. Maybe God's like a typical Jewish contractor. They start, but they don't know how to finish jobs. So here we are still waiting for the destruction, for the rebuilding of the temple. But think about the fascinating idea that Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev gives us. Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev is not saying something different than the typical explanation of the prophecy of Isaiah. You say it's a Shabbos of vision. So the typical Jew says, the Shabbos of vision because we read the vision of destruction. But Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev, our Hasidic masters tell us that within every crack, within every destruction, within every pain, within every hardship, within every struggle in your life, there's really those cracks are the opportunity for rebuilding. There's two ways you can look at this vision. You could see a vision of destruction, or as the Hasidic master of Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev tells us, you could see the vision of rebuilding. And so is in every single thing in your life. You get married, you fall in love with a girl, and everything is a bliss, and it's so joyful, it's so amazing. And then suddenly you start arguing and bickering, and life is getting tough, and you need to go see a therapist. And you say, what did I do? I got married to this guy. Look where it's holding. So there's two ways. You can see the cracks in the marriage. You can see as destruction, time to finish the marriage. Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe that's why over 50% of America gets divorced, because sometimes, unfortunately, it's not a right fit. But many times we don't even give it the good fight to rebuild. So one way you could see it is as destruction, but the other way you could see those cracks is you could say, 1 second, this is an opportunity for me to rejuvenate my marriage, to reinvigorate it, to rebuild it, to build it even stronger now that we've been through so much, and it's not just love at first sight, but we've been through the struggles, we've been through the challenges. Now, these cracks are really opportunity for rebuilding. You have a job, your dream job, you think you're going to get engaged in this company, you're going to become the manager, you're going to climb the ranks, you're going to be the successful guy, and then boom, one day you see, week after week, your boss fell in love with someone else, they're picking someone else for the job. You could see it as destruction, forget it, my life is gone. This is what I built for so many years, this is what I hope for so many years, and look what's happening. Or you could take it as an opportunity that maybe God's sending you a message, you gotta go independent. Maybe it's time to build your own business instead of working for someone else. And this goes in every single facet, in every single part, in every single struggle in our life. You're fighting depression, and you go and you see a therapist for 2 years, and you're finally feeling better, and then you see these ideas coming back to you. Do you see it as destruction, or do you look at the cracks and try to rebuild even stronger? We're dealing with a crisis in America for the past 5 months. COVID has changed our lives forever. It's brought devastation. 4 million people in America have been tested positive for coronavirus. 140,000 plus people have died. Millions of people have lost their jobs. There's cracks. It's painful. But how are we gonna see it? Are we gonna use it as an opportunity to build our society stronger? To change the fabric of our society to be more moral, more ethical, more kind, more caring? To build stronger than it was before? Or are we just gonna see destruction? And that's why the prophecy that the story the Talmud tells us about this Arab who's able to read the language of the animals is telling us something so important. That at that moment that the temple was destroyed, when the fire was burning, and the holy temple that Moses built for the Jewish people, that King Solomon built for the Jewish people was being destroyed, right then you could have seen that the redemption was being rebuilt, that the Messiah was born, that the opportunity for something greater and bigger was being born, because you can't destroy a temple unless you're going to rebuild it bigger. And that's where Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev, the Hasidic masters, in their inspiring and thoughtful and positive way, were able to articulate to us that this Shabbos, Shabbos Chazayin, which is the saddest Shabbos of the year, we don't eat meat for a week. In fact, when we make Havdalah on Saturday night, we don't drink the wine, because you're not allowed to drink wine for a week only on Shabbos. We give it to a child, or we make it on beer or something else. It's the saddest week. So you can see this vision of Isaiah, the vision of destruction, or you could see the vision of God showing you the third temple and saying, look what you could rebuild. The first 2 temples were built by man. They were human, they were finite, they were things that don't last forever. But the third temple tells us, the sages and the Talmud, will be rebuilt by God himself. God builds infinite, eternal, things that can't get destroyed, things that are valued intrinsically. So I want to give you a wish as we get ready to celebrate the Shabbos, that Hashem should bless each and every one of you and us, that we should have a Shabbos of vision. You know, the Rebbe asked in one of his talks, and I'll finish with this, I don't understand. The Berditchever says, or Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchever, that each one of us gets a vision of the third temple on this Shabbos. Let me ask you guys, I'm over 40 years old already. In my 40 years, I never remember getting the vision. So what does it mean we get a vision? Have any of you remembered seeing the vision? Could you tell me how it looks? What does it mean we get a vision? So the Rebbe says something very powerful. The Rebbe says that the vision that we get is our soul that sees it. And even though we don't see it physically and we can visualize that, it's what gives our soul the strength and the courage and the soulfulness to be able to continue and to thrive, to rebuild, to yearn towards a time of redemption, to yearn towards a messianic era. So yes, we might not see it physically, but our soul sees it, and that soul energy that we get is powerful and lasts us through the year to give us that courage to build that utopic era of redemption. So guys, it's a midsummer. We're still in the first phase of Corona. They're telling us schools might not open. If they open, it might only be 60% capacity. They might have to shut it right away. There might be who knows what the second phase will be. We don't know, but we do know that they're going into the third trial of a vaccine. And we do know that this opportunity of this crisis, of such sadness, is going to give us an opportunity to see it in a blessing of a vision of rebuilding, stronger, better, more loving, more wholesome for all of us. Shabbat Shalom. See you later.